We're going to be talking about micro church and the KC Underground. So I want to thank Brian and Rob for being with us today. I've been waiting for weeks to dig into this story with you guys. Rob, Brian, thanks for joining us. You guys have described your church as an innovative yet ancient form of church pursuing Jesus' mission in Kansas City. How you guys are the founders? Like, how did this all come about?
Well, I think, there's sort of the short-term story and the long-term story. I'll start with the short-term story. Brian and I were both on staff at a large church here in Kansas City, and they'd given us a lot of freedom. We were leading the global mission effort, and internationally, we were helping ordinary people learn to be missionary disciple makers, and they'd see these little expressions of the church emerge, and like a rabbit-sized church, and the rabbits were reproducing. And we were doing this around orphan care centers. And we basically said, hey, we want to do the same thing in Kansas City. And so we created some environments, intentional disciple-making environments to help people walk into that. And then slowly over time, we began to see really significant transformation happening in people's lives. They were actually becoming missionary disciple makers. And then as you start making new disciples, microchurches start emerging. And suddenly, there was this momentum, and about a year and a half ago, we were launched out of that church as an independent entity. And it's really not a church plant. The way that we look at it is we launched a mission agency in our city. So the analogy I usually use, if we were all going to go to, let's say, Papua New Guinea, and we were assigned a certain small geographic segment, and in a very small area in Papua New Guinea, you can have 200 tribes, but because of the geography, they're actually somewhat separated from each other. So they have different dialects and cultures and idioms. So if we were to go there, we probably wouldn't sit down and go, you know what, let's get a building, put it in the middle, and we'll start a weekend service and have amazing children's ministry, because we all stop and go, well, first of all, there's 150 different dialects. Which one are we going to pick? Second, we pick one, we alienate all the others, right? And they couldn't even, they wouldn't even want to come. But if we could raise up missionaries in every single one of those tribes, and the missionaries plant themselves and they learn how to plant the gospel, well, Jesus is going to draw new people to himself. And then as new disciples emerge, then the church emerges. So we don't talk about planting microchurches. You don't really plant a microchurch because it's not about a meeting. It's about an extended spiritual family made up of new disciples. So what you do is you plant a missionary, you plant the gospel. So we launched this mission agency, and it's a platform to launch missionaries in microchurches. And then we network those microchurches and missionaries together. And so that's kind of the short-term story. Brian, what would you add to it?
I would just wonder if that was clear as mud. for those that don't sit in that paradigm.
That's probably the clearest explanation I've ever had of that, because, I got to walk through and do some stuff with the Tampa Underground. And I remember, I think, spending most of the couple of days I was there just trying to wrap my head around the concept.
Right.
And I think for me, the way you described that, and that's actually my question for you, how important is that language of saying this is not a church plant, this is a mission agency? Because when you put it that way, it's like everything kind of snaps together. And I know language is important. So how intentional was that for you guys?
Yeah, really intentional. I mean, from the macro to the micro, from our conversation with our staff team all the way down to our kids. So early on, even while we were underneath this umbrella of a prevailing model church, we began to re-paradigm the people that were with us. I always tell the story about my kids because it's an easy one to kind of help understand how important it is to create language early. So they would ask questions like, are we going to church today? And I'd say, well, you can't go to something that you are. And, they roll their eyes now. But if they ask you that,
that's what my kids do too. Now it's like, Dad, we know, okay?
if you came into our house, our kids would say that to you, you know, like, hey, let's go to church. They go, you can't go to something that you are. So it was really beginning to help people early on understand that we are the church. Like, we use that language from the pulpit. I've used that language in church forever. But our language often betrays us, because we would say, you know, the body of Christ, that's the church. But then we would say, man, did you have a good service? Or, man, we had church today. You know, so it's like we're still stuck in these two worlds. And so we were very intentional early on to say, we're not a church. We don't want you to think that Rob and I are going to start this new thing where I'm going to lead worship and he's going to teach and we're going to do what you're used to. Because if we gather you, we're still kind of in a model where we're pulling you out of your neighborhood or out of the pocket of people that you're gifted to reach, or that Jesus has made you for, or that he sent you to. We really want that mindset of sending back into. So all of our language is around that idea of, we want to take missionaries and insert them into pockets of people or geographical areas, and understand that this is the place you should be planted. This is the place I've sent you.